Today we talk about food composition data are essential for food-based nutrition and nutrition-sensitive agricultures. Food compositions data are very important tool for nutritionists, the food industry, policy makers and consumers. Food consumption, food composition databases are intended to provide data for prioritized foods that are commonly consumed or are nutritionally important. Nutrient composition databases are produced in most countries and are many are freely available online. There are many factors that lead to variations in the composition of foods, and composition of individual foods may differ. There are limitations in the use of the food composition data, and these should be considered by the users, particularly when using data to calculate nutrient intake. A knowledge of the chemical composition of the food is the first essential in the dietary treatment of disease or in any quantitative essential in the dietary recommendations. Study of human nutrition can be representative. This statement was originally published in 1940 as part of the first sentence in the introduction to a book that evolved into the McCanney and Widdowson series of UK food composition publications. The statement is just as true today, and although it is not often obvious, food composition data underpin almost all research into the links between diet and health. Food composition data are used by policymakers, agri-food industries, dietitians, health practitioners, and consumers. Published food composition data can be tracked back over 200 years to when Hoffman published data on the composition of mineral waters. Data on vegetable substances was published in book form by Johann John in 1840. Food composition tables in the format used today were not published until the later part of the 19th century. The first European composition table was published in Germany in 1878, and the first North American tables followed in 1896. UK interest in food composition can be traced back to the First World War, when the British War Office analysed common foods, with the result being published in 1921. In 1925, McCain was awarded a Medical Research Council grant to analyze carbohydrates in raw and cooked vegetables. The results were combined into the first edition of what became The Composition of Foods, with the title of The Composition of Food. UK data have been published in a series of analytical reports, books, and electronic data files. The most recent publication being the Macon and Widdowson The Composition of Foods, 7th summary edition, in the year of 2015, and the Composition of Foods integrated datasets. Many countries produce their own national food composition databases, and most of them are available online, searchable, and free of charge. Most European datasets are updated regularly and available directly from the organizations that produce them. and also through the European Food Information Resource. In developing countries, the picture is very different, as many countries do not have a national food composition databases, or only an outdated one of inadequate quality according to international standards. They very often use the food composition databases from other countries, especially the United States Department of Agriculture database, as it is comprehensive and easily accessible. The International Network of Food Data Systems, in short INFOODS, was established in 1984 with the objective to improve the quality and availability of relevant food composition data worldwide. InFoods also maintains an inventory of international food composition resources. Food composition data are used by a wide selection of individuals and organizations working at both national and international levels. The diversity of users means that there are differing requirements depending on use, and it is challenging for data producers to provide information in a form that satisfies end users. Many users have to adapt published datasets and modify the data to suit their own requirement, as the national or regional food composition databases does not include all foods, recipes, or components of interest, or has missing values or documentation. The publication of data in electronic form makes their use easier, but has resulted in further challenges related to data quality, data exchange formats, and documentation. All users require high quality data on foods and recipes that are commonly consumed or are nutritionally important to specific population. Information on an increasingly wide range of food components is also required, including nutrients, bioactive compounds, contaminants, toxicants, and allergens. There is also an increasing need for data on food supplements that are consumed and then contribute dramatically to nutrient intake. Dietary supplements are traditionally not included in food composition databases, but several countries have included supplements in separate databases that are used for national consumption surveys. Many national food composition databases are produced and maintained to provide data for national dietary monitoring programs. For example, UK Composition of Foods data underpins Public Health England's Nutrient Data Bank, which is linked to consumption survey data to produce results for the National Diet and Nutrition Service. The Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Family Food Survey in the UK also uses the food composition data to derive nutrient intakes from household food purchases. Similar food composition and consumption survey programs are in place in other countries and are likely to be implemented in the countries that do not yet have a national food composition databases. Variability in food composition databases can lead to errors in estimation of nutrient intake that affect the assessment of intakes of proportion of the population experiencing nutrient inadequacy or who have intakes above toxic threshold. Individuals may also be misclassified, leading to errors in correlation between nutrient intakes and diseases or nutritional interventions. Sources of variability between foods included in an food composition databases and the foods actually consumed by individuals include natural variations, for example, differences in plant varieties, growing conditions, post-harvest storage, animal species, and extrinsic variations due to differences in production and processing. Systematic errors may also occur where fortification or supplementation is not taken into account. Food composition databases contain values for the total amounts of nutrients in the food and do not consider bioavailability. So the calculations of intake based on composition data represents the maximum amount of the nutrient that is available to the body. Etymological and other research studies are also dependent on food composition data that provide representative data for food consumed by the populations being studied. Data are needed for all nutrients of interest, but are unlikely to be available for all nutrients for all foods. The use of more standardized datasets and linking between data available in different datasets helps to improve the quantity of information available and aid development of modified datasets for specific uses. In recent years, datasets from European countries have been combined for use in European Perspective Investigation into Cancer, European Food Safety Authority Food Composition Dataset. It is to be noted that data from other countries are very likely to be different from the composition of the local foods, and use of such data can lead to random errors that result in misclassifications, leading to the underestimation of true correlation between nutrient intakes and diseases or nutritional interventions. Food industry uses food composition data and supporting information to develop new and modified products that will conform to nutrition policy. For example, reduction of salt, sugar, saturated and trans fatty acid in processed foods. The European Food Information Regulation made nutrient labeling mandatory from December 2016 and applies to all foods intended for the final consumer, including foods delivered by mass caterers and food intended for supply to mass caterers. In the international arena, Codex Alimentarius recommends that nutrient labeling should be mandatory for protein, total fat, saturated fat, available carbohydrates, sugars, sodium and energy for all pre-packed foods. Codex Alimentarius also recommends that nutrient values should be provided for any other nutrient for which a nutrition or health claim is made and any other nutrient considered to be relevant for maintaining a good nutritional status as required by national legislation or national dietary guidelines. In European, in addition to protein, total fat, saturated fat, available carbohydrate, sugars, salt, and energy nutrient values can also be declared for monounsaturates, polyunsaturates, polyols, starch, dietary fiber, and a defined range of minerals and vitamins. It is also compulsory to declare nutrient values for any substance on which a nutrition or health claim is made. Those values can derive from chemical analysis or from recognized national food composition datasets. Nutritional information on food labels enables the consumers to make informed choices based on nutrient composition of food products. Retailers and manufacturers often make nutrient labeling information available on their websites. Food composition is very important marketing tool, and producers and manufacturers are very aware of changes in composition that may imply that a food product is more or less healthy. There is a trend in making more food composition data available on branded foods with complete nutrient profiles in food composition databases. Branded foods represent an increasing proportion of food worldwide. So, this would be a very important step forward in allowing improved nutrient estimations, providing that the quality of data can be maintained and data sets can be kept up to date. The large quantity of branded products available and the frequency of changes in products available to consumer makes the task of maintaining good quality data for minerals and vitamins very challenging for national food composition data compliance. Composition data are currently usually available either as generic database sets of nationally representative foods with comprehensive nutrient coverages or as distinct datasets of branded foods with limited nutrient coverage. Agriculture practices can also be influenced by nutrition policy, and it is important that food composition data adequately reflects biodiversity of plant-based foods and reflects trends in production of crops that have been bred to have higher amounts of micronutrients, for example, cereal crops with enhanced content of iron, zinc, or vitamin A. Results from National Monitoring Service and research studies inform nutrition policy at national and international levels. Food industry and health practitioners, doctors, dietitians, nutritionists will respond to policy changes. National food composition databases should include not only commonly consumed foods but also those of high micronutrient content and those consumed by a specific population group to be able to tailor advice to their traditions, culture, preferences, and health conditions. Food composition data must reflect changes by industry to enable health practitioners to base decisions and advice on good quality and up-to-date information. Consumers may use food composition data directly but are more likely to use information that is presented in modified forms. Consumers' interest in food composition and nutrition will require composition data to be made available in more easily accessible forms. Many software applications already include food composition data and can be delivered using web-based mobile applications, increasing consumer interest in diet and health has encouraged the development of many such software applications that rely on food composition data to help consumers monitor their nutrient intake against either recommended or personal target intakes. Some software is aimed at particular consumer groups where education in food composition and healthy diets is an important feature. Developers of these applications should inform users on the underlying sources of food composition data so that users can select the application that most likely reflects their food consumed. The cost of food analysis are high, and human resources are needed to compile, manage, and maintain food composition databases. The investment in food composition programs is proportional to the coverage of foods and nutrients and their quality and relevance. The high demands on comprehensive and high quality food composition data are not met by all existing food composition databases, as national and international investment in these fundamental data are insufficient. This means that often only values for commonly consumed foods are included for a limited selection of nutrients. Foods are usually prioritized based on nutritional composition statistics, consumption in specific population subgroup, for example infants, elderly, ethnic, and on changes in food production and processing. These can be used as a basis to identify the foods that are most important in the population diets. Some key foods may only be key contributor to one or two nutrients, but a significant number may be a contributor to intake of 10 or more nutrients. An alternative approach is to base the choice of foods on composition data and make subjective assessment of a food's importance. A wide range of users, including researchers, government departments, and industry, should be consulted to ensure that priorities meet the demands of users. In addition to the national food composition databases of generic foods, data for branded food products are also widely available. European Union labeling regulations require that nutrient content of energy, fat, saturated fat, carbohydrate, sugars, protein, and salt must be provided on labels of pre-packaged foods, with the option of providing data for some additional nutrients. Food composition database should be continually revised to provide data for new foods and for the foods where composition has changed. Most food composition databases are revised based on foods that are identified as priorities. Priorities may be based on food types, for example, surveys of eggs, meat, fish, fruits, and vegetables, or in some cases, based on nutrients that are expected to have changed. The different needs of users requires that compositional data should be provided for raw foods, processed foods, or foods as prepared for consumption. The different states of foods included means that careful consideration should be given to the description of each food, particularly where differences impact on nutrient composition, for example, vegetables, raw or cooked vegetables, boiled with or without added salt, fruit canned in juices or syrup, fish canned in oil. Faceted systems have been developed to describe the foods and to distinguish between different foods that may not be fully described by the food name alone. Composition databases should aim to include values for all nutrients and non-nutrients food components that are known or believed to be important for human health. Analysis of some food components, vitamins and bioactive component is very expensive. Resources are usually limited. Many datasets concentrate on components that have been selected as priorities and are more selective in providing the data for additional components. For example, information on water, protein, fats, carbohydrates, and energy are core to all nutrient datasets, and some minerals and vitamins are likely to be included based on nutritional requirements for health. Priorities are often set at a national or regional level and dependent on known diet-related health problems. The availability of alternative sources of data could be taken into account, where the data can reasonably be applied to the population of interest. The existence of legislation related to the food information also has an impact on data available for specific nutrients because food will be routinely analyzed where data provision is required by laws. Correct identifications of components is essential, but not always straightforward. Some food components are calculated from contributing components, either with or without the use of conversion factor. For examples are in proteins, which is not analyzed directly but is calculated from the total nitrogen value using conversion factors and energy, which is calculated from food components that contribute to the energy, including protein, fat, carbohydrate, fiber, organic acids, and short chain and long chain acyl triglyceride molecules. The extent of the coverage of nutrient components in food composition databases varies between countries. The number of components included in European databases varies from about 30 to 300, although the coverage for components varies between the databases. It should be noted that low coverage does not mean a large number of missing values, because some components do not naturally occur in all food groups. The UK Composition of Food series of publication and analytical laboratory report associated with the series have also published data for a limited range of foods for other nutrients. For example, dietary fiber, cellulose, lignin, phytic acid, resistant starches, choline, and amino acid. Food composition databases from other countries generally contain data for a similar range of components, although, as in the UK, data for some inorganic components, some vitamins, phytosterols, and organic acid may be limited to the key foods. Bioactive compounds are essential and non-essential compounds that occur in nature and have an impact on health. Some essential bioactive compounds are commonly included in food composition tables, that is, vitamins, oligosaccharides, and phytosterols. But most are not included, and data are available either in specialist dataset or from scientific literature. There is a growing interest in bioactive compounds and an increasing body of investigation their impact on human health. Bioactive compounds are found in plant-based foods. Association between intake of fruits and vegetables and prevalence or risk of the chronic diseases is a common focus. Several online databases for bioactive available, including the USDA database for the flavonoid content of foods release 3.2, eBasis and Phenol Explorer. Each of these databases contains different examples of bioactive classes, and all use quality systems to extract data from peer-reviewed researches. The Eurofire eBasis database is a collection of data relating to bioactive compounds in plant-based food. The database is divided into two principal sections: composition data and bioeffects data. eBasis consists of a user-friendly interface for searching, extracting, and exporting the data. The entire database includes the data from over 1100 peer publications, forming 39,000 data points, covering 750 compounds in over 250 food planets, with the data linked to authoritative plant and plant part list. The Phenol Explorer database is a comprehensive phenol dataset and contain more than 35,000 contents values for 500 different polyphenols in over 400 foods. These data are derived from the systematic collection of more than 60,000 original contents value found in more than 1,300 scientific publications. Each of these publications has been critically evaluated before inclusion in the database. The main focus of food composition has been on components that are beneficial to the health. But foods can also contain the contaminant substances that are not intended to be present. Sources of contamination include environmental, that is soil, water, atmosphere, production processes and packaging or storage. Contamination is associated with potential health risk dependent on exposure levels, and many countries monitor the food chain for substance of concern and apply policies to limit exposure. Food supplements are significant sources of some nutrients and bioactive components for a growing proportion of the population in developed countries, and it is important to consider their impact in any dietary survey. Many national organizations that monitor the diet collect information on supplements and their ingredients, but these data are not often publicly available. The USDA Nutrient Data Laboratory publishes the Dietary Supplement Ingredient Database, which contains data from analysis of representative sample of multivitamin, mineral, and omega-3 fatty acid supplements. The sample analyzed are prioritized based on intake prevalence data identified from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. The U.S. National Institute of Health's dietary supplement label database is also available online and contains information from a wide range of dietary supplements products. Food composition data can be derived from a variety of sources, and most composition datasets contain values produced in a range of different ways. Data quality is associated with a variety of factors, such as food description, component identification, sample collection, sample handling, analytical method, and laboratory performance. Related to derivation of values, but national food composition databases are compiled by experts and all published values are judged to be reasonable estimations of the nutrient composition foods. Sources of food composition data include analytical values derived by direct analysis. Direct analysis of food sample is the preferred data source, but the process of sample collection and analysis is expensive, and few data compilers have the resources to analyze all foods for all nutrients. A range of representative samples are collected and analyzed individually so that descriptive statistics can be produced, but the cost is prohibitive and samples may be pooled into a composite sample with only a single value being published. The composite sample approach means that analytical data can be provided for a larger range of foods and nutrients, and this is considered by many data compilers to be preferable to publishing more values for the same type of foods. In some situations, analysis may be carried out specifically for the purposes of compiling a database, but carefully evaluated analytical data from other types of surveys and from other sources can also be used. Original analytical data may be used as the basis for calculation of values for a similar food or a different form of the same foods. Some nutrients may be calculated from other nutrients that have been analyzed. For example, chloride calculated from sodium or calculated from a combination of nutrients. For example, moisture calculated by difference. Values for many foods are calculated from recipes based on the nutrient content of ingredients and on weight loss or gain during cooking. Values for heat labile vitamins are usually corrected for losses that are likely to occur during cooking. The recipes used for calculation are usually representative of recipes that would be commonly used in the home or are based on traditional recipes. The amounts and types of ingredients used and the preparation procedures employed are likely to be very variable. So these calculated values may not always compare well with the composition of food prepared by individual consumers. Food composition database compilers are not able to produce data for all food consumed. So values for some foods or nutrients may be taken from another country's food composition tables. In this case, the values should be referenced back to their original sources wherever possible. The original values may be modified to match the known water or fat content of the food they are intended to represent, to enable users to evaluate the data they are using or to allow further investigations of the data sources. It is important that values should be traceable to their original source whenever possible. In recent decades, there has been a worldwide trend in dietary simplification, with possible negative impacts on food security, nutrition, and health. The range of plant varieties cultivated has reduced significantly. In most Asian countries, the number of rice varieties being grown has dropped from thousands to just a few dozens, and diets rely on a limited number of energy rich foods. Biodiversity in nutrition is important to encourage promotion of a diverse and sustainable diets that includes different foods and different species of the plants and animals. The variations in nutrient content within the species can be as high as the variation between species, and those differences can potentially make the difference between nutritional adequacy and inadequacy. For example, protein content of rice varieties range between 5 to 14 grams per 100 grams, and the carotenoid content of sweet potatoes can differ by a factor of 200 or more. Crops that are currently underutilized may be important nutritional alternatives to mainstream crops, and there is growing evidence that food-based approaches to nutrition can be useful alternatives to fortification and supplementation. Nutrient composition can differ between different varieties, cultivators, breeds of the same species, and the availability of the food composition data reflecting those differences is needed to underpin the link between biodiversity and nutrition. Food composition databases in developed countries often do not include the data that reflect the biodiversity of foods because they are usually based on foods that are commonly consumed and are the most widely available commercial varieties. Nutrition data are very essential for food-based nutrition and nutrition-sensitive agriculture. Food composition data are important tool for nutritionists, dietitians, food industry, policymakers, and consumers. Food composition databases are intended to provide data for prioritized foods that are commonly consumed or are nutritionally important. Nutrient composition databases are produced in most countries and many are freely available online. Specialist datasets are available for bioactive compounds, contaminants, and dietary components. There are some limitations in the use of food composition data, and these should be considered by the users, particularly when using the data to calculate nutrient intake. International Network of Data Food Data System. It was established in 1984. It is a worldwide network of food composition experts aiming to improve the quality, availability, reliability, and the use of the food composition data. InFoods also stands as a forum through which international harmonization and support for food composition activities which can be achieved and advocated. InFoods is organized into several regional data centers with a global coordinator. InFoods and FAO provide guidelines, standards, completion tools, databases, capacity development tools, policy advices, technical assistance at country level, and they represent a fora to link agriculture, biodiversity, food systems, health, and nutrition to achieve the better nutrition worldwide. Access to adequate food is a fundamental right of all people. If any right can be called the most fundamental right, it is the right to life, and proper nutrition is essential in fulfilling this right. Long-term goals of the Government of Pakistan for Vision 2025 will support from international development agencies, including UNICEF, have been developed with a view to fulfill this fundamental human right to food and nutrition in Pakistan with the premises that food is a fundamental human right. Everyone should have access to food, sufficient, balanced, and safe to satisfy the nutritional requirements, culturally acceptable, accessible in a manner which does not destroy one's dignity as human. Unfortunately, despite increased recognition about the need to fulfill human rights to nutrition and greater understanding of the role of nutrition, especially a child and of women and children in Pakistan, has remained at alarming poor levels. Basic indices of prevalence of malnutrition have changed very little over the last 20 years or more. The extent of the problems have further increased, as number of malnourished children is estimated at 8 million at the onset of the new century 2000. One third of pregnant women are malnourished, and on an average, one fourth of newborns is low birth weight. Maternal malnutrition affects 34% of pregnant of lactating women have a caloric intake of less than 70% of the recommended level. Vitamin A deficiency is a significant public health problem affecting 30% children, according to a recent micronutrient survey done for KPK. Iron deficiency anemia among the children and women of reproductive age is another problem of serious public health significance. Malnutrition is an important and impediment to human development, and it represents a major constraint in the national development effort. Attempts to overcome the serious problem have been in the last 2 decades fragmented and low in profile. These efforts were not able to show any change in the nutritional status of the nation. Malnutrition continues to be a major problem in Pakistan, with devastating impact on health and survival of women and children. Inadequate food intake contributes substantially to childhood death and diseases, but generally goes unrecognized as such. Intensive nutrition education campaign is required, targeting all the major stakeholders, including general public and key actors across all sectors including planning, health, population and welfare, agriculture, education and industry, the private sector and non-government organizations working in the field of health and nutrition. The desirable dietary patterns according to the FAO recommendations and for comparisons, national dietary intake patterns, the recommendations to vary according to activity levels and physiological needs, that is, during the pregnancy and the lactation, the requirements are higher. But in the overall, the dietary intake pattern for Pakistan is below the recommended level. Increasing the overall national dietary survey pattern is highly beneficial as adequate dietary intake can ensure good health by strengthening the body defense mechanism against infection and by contributing to mental and physical growth and development. So this becomes critical for maintenance of economically vibrant and protected as well as social and physical active population. Here is an assignment for you. You have to identify those food composition databases which are used in Pakistan to compose any diet and manual.